This is Pixelated Audio, episode 91, featuring Yuurei-kun on the MSX2. All right, and welcome back to the bi-weekly video game music and retro gaming podcast, Pixelated Audio. I'm your host, Brian, and today, James is actually sick.
So I'm your host, Gene, filling in for James.
I was sick last week, and James is like dog-tired sick this week. We thought, hey, maybe Gene could tag in for him this week, and Gene's been on 2 different episodes now.
That's right, yeah.
So it works out. You know our format, you know our flow, and I'm excited.
Well, I'm not sick, but with the wildfires, man, it's been bad. I don't sound great, and I know that's a big part of it right now.
Yeah. So to give you a little context here, we're in California, and there is a huge fire going on.
It's awful
up north, and so it's all blowing down into the Bay Area, and we're just getting it.
Yeah, I feel so sorry for the people up in Napa County and in the North Bay. It's been a
mess. Yeah. But anyways, today we are going to be talking about a game called Yuurei-kun, and it's for the MSX2. This is a title that, James and I were talking about actually doing this at some point. It's a very simple kind of game. It's just a lot of fun, and we thought, maybe we could do kind of a mini show. So I think it's going to work out well for today.
Yeah, actually, I came into this one a little bit late. It was interesting. I was over here hanging out, playing games a little bit with Brian, and it was just a very immediately appealing game. It had nice colors, and even though the soundtrack's fairly simple, it's very pleasant melodies, and I really enjoyed it. And I made it all the way through the second level on my first try, and that's where things started to get tough.
Yeah. So, James and I decided to kind of do an episode on this at some point. We asked Gene to come on, and we're like, hey, what do you want to do? Like, do you have any topic in mind? And I kind of pitched this idea to you. And at first you were kind of like, well, why don't we look at some other options? But after playing, and I think after listening, you kind of, it's catchy. It's really catchy.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about it more, but there's, themes are established pretty early on in the soundtrack, right from that title. And it kind of goes throughout the entire soundtrack.
Yeah. But the PSG, it is a lot more simple. It's not as robust as, an OPNA or OPL, even the NES sound hardware. It's very simple. It's 3 tones. It's the YM2149, which is 3 voices of PSG, and then that's the same chip as the AY38910. Some minor differences, but that track that we came in with, that was the title demo, the title screen. As it's kind of going through these. I guess this little intro thing, it shows you how to use the controls. It kind of explains your gauges and stuff like that. And it's a catchy little, I think this sets the mood real well.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It leads really well into the first track, which, do you want to get into that?
Well,
it's a little too soon.
Why don't we jump the gun, Gene?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But I think the title screen is perfect because it's like this little demo. This track's only 26 seconds or something like that, and really that's all you need because they're doing this kind of attract mode, explaining the game a little bit and showing different levels and stuff. And I think it's a nice little kind of tight track that delivers the point.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So Yuurei-kun is a side-scrolling action game, almost like a free-roaming shooter in a sense, that was released for the MSX2 and higher compatible machines in 1989, both published and developed by System Sacom. And System Sacom is maybe not so well known, actually probably not well known at all here in the States, but we have talked about them on the show before.
Yeah, I think the only game they'd be known for here is Smart Ball on the Super Nintendo. I think it was one of the few games that actually came out here.
For what system?
Super Nintendo.
Oh, so okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was also called Jerry Boy or Jelly Boy, but the U.S. title was Smart Ball.
Right.
It did have good music, but it was a sort of it had a pretty interesting premise. You control a a ball that can change shape and density, like it can become heavier or softer based on, like sort of like a bowling ball or a cloud kind of thing, before that sort of physics-based gameplay became really popular in, later systems.
Huh. Yeah, I guess I have to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's a neat concept.
I know the name, but I don't even know the music, I don't think. Huh. Anyways, so System Sacom, Japanese game developer and publisher that was founded in 1981 in Tokyo. A lot of their stuff was just never released outside of Jelly Ball or
Smart Ball.
Smart Ball. But one thing that they're kind of well known for is their novelware adventure games. And they basically created this engine that had a major impact on visual novels kind of moving forward into, the PC-88, PC-98, and even the Sharp X68000. And I think that a lot of what Japanese gamers kind of, I guess, became used to is kind of that engine and how the games were presented in that kind of manner.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking through some of the videos of playthroughs through some of their games, and while I was aware of earlier Japanese adventure games and point and clicks and text adventures, there's a certain kind of cinematic element to the way these games are. And, if you've played Snatch or some of the later Japanese games, they feel very strongly influenced by these, at least, seeing what other people are doing and like, oh, we should borrow some of those elements.
I would even go as far as to say like Police Knots and...
Oh, of course.
Yeah, totally.
And I mean, I think the first one of these games was 1988, right? Something like that.
1985, they actually did Martian Vale 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they actually did the whole series up till 1987. So there was like this period where they were only doing this one series, but then they kind of later branched off into a bunch of different stuff. There's, stuff like, I'm trying to see if any of these ring a bell. So Atomic Robo Kid might be known. Gemini Wing.
I think the version that they did was just a port because it was on a lot of systems.
Oh, yeah, it would have been a port. Yeah. So I do want to talk about the composer Manabu Saito. We've talked about him on the show before, but I think it's good that we kind of talk about this because this game, I think, is a good example of the elegance and simplicity that is in his composition style. And there's going to be a lot of really cool tracks that I think we're going to learn a lot more about how he composes music for just 3 voices. So let's get into another track first. This is from Stage 1 for Yuurei-kun on the MSX2.
So that was from Stage 1 of Yuurei-kun, composed by Manabu Saito for the MSX2.
Now, this is the first stage, so this is where you actually are learning how to play the game, and it's very uplifting, very upbeat, kind of makes you want to smile already. They're really setting this game up to be like an adorable, like little guy that you want to snuggle with. Like, you know, it's I don't know. I like the swing, the kind of shuffle to it. It's got these really pretty kind of almost like vocalized like harmony and melody tones just kind of together. They're very soft and I mean, they do stand out. They're very predominant, but they're almost kind of soft and elegant at the same way, very delicate.
Yeah, there were a lot of things that, for being such a short track, there's a lot of really good elements to it. The beginning part, the A section, has a lot of it uses a combination of delay and note length to give a sort of character. Then you get to the B section, which starts off using harmonies, and then halfway through, they kind of sneak in that melody from the first part. You don't even notice that they drop out a channel, and then there's that tag that brings you back to the beginning. It's a really well-composed track for being like 40 seconds long.
Right. So real quick, let's kind of back up here.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the sound hardware before for the MSX. If you go back and listen to our Nightmare episode, I'm not sure what that was. That was episode 40, somewhere in there. But we talked about the MSX and different models of the sound hardware. But it was commonly found, the YM2149 that we're hearing today is commonly found in the Amstrad CPC, the ZX Spectrum, and the Atari ST. And there's a ton of arcade games and different pinball machines and just different devices that made use of this chip in the 80s and 90s. It was very, very big and it was cheap. So we saw it in a ton of different things, sometimes paired up or doubled up. And the AY38910, that was in really all the MSX1 systems. And then as they kind of progressed, they moved to the YM chip, the YM2149. And that was pretty much in the MSX2s and up, pretty much everything moving forward. They're nearly identical, but they differ slightly in the sense that the AY chip uses 4 bits for duration and the YM uses 5. And this would make tone sound slightly shorter if you were listening to like the same track, and also probably a little bit more harsh.
Yeah, it does give it a little bit more granularity, though, so you can control the sound just a little bit better.
Again, it's a minimal difference, but if you compare them side by side, I think it's probably pretty noticeable.
Yeah, I do think that the tones on the YM2149 are just a little bit cleaner, just a little bit.
I feel that way too. Yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily true.
It feels that way.
I feel that way too. Yeah. When I listen to a lot of demo scene stuff, I typically side with the YM stuff more, like listening to it in YM. But again, that's personal preference. Either way, it's totally fine. I think on the YM chip, there is also a pin to have the clock speed, and if you pull the pin up or something, it's identical to the AY chip. So again, it's really just that kind of duration and tone that makes any difference, I think.
Yeah, according to this, it's pin 26.
Pin 26. What did I say?
No, you were right.
I was right?
There is a pin, but I'm on a page for it.
Yeah, okay. So why don't we talk about Manabu Saito a little bit, this composer?
Yeah, so Manabu Saito came up on episode 68 in the 5 Years of EGM Rips episode.
Oh, right. That was the Volna track.
Yes, and he was a very early student of piano and apparently something of a child prodigy. He won some awards. He actually went to Vienna to go visit the birth, or I guess the the home of Beethoven, very much steeped in the classical tradition.
And he was in high school when he actually did that.
That's right, yeah. He was very, very dedicated and did... from what I've read about him, he analyzed a lot of classical pieces and had a lot of strong opinions about the various composers, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, the rest.
Right. Yeah, but when he was still in high school, he actually got a part-time job working at System Sacom.
Yeah, and it was shortly after that he became their full-time composer.
Right. I mean, he's in high school student.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. I mean, you have to be good, right? You have to be good. So this is 1989. This game came out, right?
Yeah. Well, he was born in 1970, so that would have made him 18, I guess, at the time.
Yes. I could do the math, but man, I don't know. It just boggles my mind. What was I doing when I was 18? Probably just being a loser. I mean,
yeah, just probably playing video games.
Yeah, probably being a dork. But he continued studying, and then he got a part-time job at System Sacom, eventually becoming their lead composer, writing for tons of different titles, including the first MIDI-compatible PC game in Japan called 38,000 Kiro no Koku,
which basically means 380,000 kilometers of emptiness. It's sort of the distance between the Earth and the Moon, so space, and it's
a good soundtrack.
It's really good.
Yeah, and some of his other well-known stuff like Providence on the PC-88, Chatty also on the PC-88. There was Euphoria on the X1 and a few other different ports of that. Evolution on the FM Towns, and then Yami no Ketsuzoku for the X68000 and FM Towns. Then he also did the port of the sound for Xenon 2 Mega Blast on the X68000. A lot of really good soundtrack, like solid music if you kind of go through his catalog.
Yeah, and this is an interesting one. He co-composed the music to Smart Ball, which you might not know the game, but you might recognize somebody else he co-composed with, which is Akira Yamaoka.
Yes.
That's a name that might come up for people that like Konami and a lot of his tracks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, and we talked about this before on the show too, Saito actually passed away from kidney failure on October of 1992. He was 22 years old.
He died on October 1st, so we're actually not too far off from the anniversary.
Yep. And then his brother, I guess, maintains like a website, like a memorial website for him. But there is a lot of information. It's a shame that we lost somebody that could have gone to produce some pretty incredible stuff early on.
I read about him, and it really is just so amazing. I mean, he wrote something like 10 to 12 soundtracks in that 3 or 4 year period, and I may be getting the translation wrong, but it said that when he passed, he had something like 2,000 tracks completed, which is just an incredible amount of music to make in such a short period of time.
For such a young guy.
Yeah, I know. And the website that he mentioned, you have to kind of use the Wayback Machine. It's still there, and it's
the memorial site.
Yeah, the memorial site.
I think I saw it on the Wayback Machine. Yeah,
but it's just really interesting sort of look at his life, and it's partially a journaling site for his brother Akira and sort of historical record of his brother Manabu, who passed away, of course, and just sort of talking about his accomplishments over the years.
Right. Yeah, it's just too bad. Every time I hear the name Manabu Saito come up in, I'm listening to something or somebody else posts a track by him, I'm like, God damn, too bad. It's too bad. But we can enjoy his music today, so that's awesome. And let's actually listen to a few more tracks. So the next track we're going to play is from Stage 2.
That was Stage 2 from Yuurei-kun, composed by Manabu Saito for the MSX2.
Absolutely adore this track. It's got this very nice swing kind of bounciness to it, but at the same time, that lead is almost haunting.
I was going to say that word, but I didn't want to be too cheeky about a game about a ghost.
Well, I mean, it is, though. It's got this kind of wispy, kind of like, woo kind of sound to it.
It's just this trailing notes at the end of the phrase. It just really lingers in a great way.
Yeah, but at the same time, they kind of turn it around, right? Like the sound, he brings it up and makes this kind of like eeriness, and then switches back into this kind of more playful tone, this playful melody again. And I think that's kind of what draws me to it, because the game, especially during this part of the game, you're in this kind of dark cave moving down, and it feels like you're almost getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then it explodes again. It's happy and it starts all over. I like that.
Yeah, this is one of two of the scrolling levels, which is why the track is a little bit longer. The scrolling levels are actually quite long. I think they're about 7 minutes of gameplay, so the longer tracks help.
Did you time that out?
I was just I was watching through a playthrough of it because I couldn't beat the level. One thing I wanted to say that I really love about this track that I think is probably a hallmark of this whole soundtrack is the use of note duration, pitch bend and note duration. I think using the sound chip's limitations, you have to have some tricks up your sleeve. So just being very particular about which notes are short and which ones are long, and just even the repetitions between the same melody. I think there's just like some really, really brilliant composition.
And that's kind of another thing I want to bring up. So 3 voices for this PSG. What do you do with the white noise? How do you make a bass tone, a harmony and melody, and then have your percussion in? Well, there's a lot of swapping, right? So you get like some white noise, and you get like a bass line. But sometimes you want to combine those, right? So what he does is he'll kind of make this white noise and then like this really kind of simple bass tone that's a lot softer, and it creates this sound in your head that the bass and the percussion are playing at the same time, when really it's like 2 separate things. So I think it's clever use of channel manipulation.
Totally. I think you're not going to hear from most Japanese composers that the really crazy tricks that you hear from European developers, but it's a really solid track in its own right.
So why don't we get into another track? This is from stage 3, and then we'll talk about the game a little bit. All right, that was from stage 3, composed by Manabu Saito for Yuurei-kun.
What a difference in that bass line. It's so much more high energy and kind of aggressive, actually.
Yeah, I think this is a really good example of kind of what I was saying earlier about playing the white noise, like immediately having a bass line follow it. So you get like kind of this continuous galloping sound with the bass, but you still have that percussion sound in there.
Oh, yeah. I think what was really, and a lot of the stuff that I was saying earlier too applies, is that there's just this really tasteful use of changing the note lengths and using, rhythms. Like there's just tiny bits of triplets. Nothing really overstays its welcome. And it's just so, I would say it's almost up there with like the catchiness or memorability of like a Mega Man soundtrack. Like that particular tune just has this really great, I can listen to it over and over, and it's super short.
Yeah, you were looking at me like as that like part was playing, where they kind of harmonized together towards the end of that first section, or maybe it's the second section, and they kind of do this like and then like it's almost like a whistle blowing, like really kind of obnoxious sound, but it's so cool. And you kind of looked at me like, oh yeah, that's how you do it, Saito-san. No, it's just a cool track. I totally like this. Level, not so much, but we should probably talk about this game.
Of course, yeah.
We've been kind of avoiding it for a second, but no, the game is actually a blast. It's totally fun.
Yeah. So the game plays a little bit like Mr. Heli, or even possibly Fantasy Zone.
Right.
You sort of control a ship that can move in any direction, but instead of the levels scrolling, the majority of them you can kind of move around freely. There's enemies that come off the screen, sort of like Castlevania style. You've got things popping up constantly.
And it's really random.
It's fun, but sometimes it does work against you, and it can be a little frustrating. But you do have a life bar. It's not like a one-hit kill sort of game, so eventually I think with practice it's a game that's not too hard to beat. It looks like it would be.
Right. So instead of, flying a ship around, you control Yuurei-kun, this adorable little Casper-like ghost who is, he's kind of just trotting around. He's got this little, like, wisp by him, right? A little spirit
Yeah.
kind of thing that float. It's weird. So he's a ghost, and he's got this little buddy ghost that kind of floats around, and you can use that ghost to stun guys. You can kind of shoot him out and stun guys, or if you hit him enough, you can kill him or whatever. But his main way of attacking is this backwards like butt bash.
Yeah, it's like a dash, butt bash, escape maneuver kind of thing.
Right, but he can only do it backwards. So if you're wanting to attack the the bad guy in front of you, you actually have to quickly turn around and then use the backwards butt dash to take him out. And you can, if you hit one guy and he hits multiple guys, you get like a higher score. It's really addictive, and it's super fun. And that's why I couldn't stop playing it. I think I did a stream like 8 months ago or something, and I played it for like 3 hours or something.
Yeah, the mechanics are really simple, but I think they're pretty clever. You have that sort of wisp that you shoot out, which is kind of like an option, an R-type in a way. It kind of goes out a little bit and then comes back.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
You get more of them as you go on through the game. You can have, I think, up to 3.
I had 2 at one point, and I didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah. And the butt bash, I'm just going to call it that for this.
The remainder of the show.
It's a kind of a multi-purpose move. You can use it to break blocks, which often hold hidden rooms, sort of, like you go in and there's like, bonus items, power-ups, coins, which you collect. It is a limited use power, so if you use it too much, you have to wait for it to replenish, so you have to kind of balance using the wisps and the butt bash. And also, like was mentioned, you can bounce enemies, so you knock into them backwards and they can go flying across the screen. And
have like multipliers and stuff. And some bosses, that's the way you have to defeat them. You actually have to, they'll shoot out these little baddies at you, and you have to like butt bash them into the main boss.
Yeah.
So, man, that first boss, drove me absolutely crazy. Why don't we get into another track, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the game. This is from Stage 4 from Yuurei-kun on the MSX.
That was Stage 4 from Yuurei-kun, composed by Manabu Saito.
It's a little bit more of a dark track, a little bit heavier.
Yeah.
I like this track. It has, again, I hate saying cliche, but it has this very haunting uncertainty and kind of maybe despair or something a little bit. I'm not trying to be too deep here, but like it really does have some kind of like desperate kind of sound.
I mean, it starts off with those really long notes. Like, I think that's, I don't want to say it's a risk, but sometimes if you do stuff like that, it just leaves it so open, and it's just like all you're hearing is the bass. But here, I think it just creates that mood where it's just sort of like very ethereal. I mean, as much as you can do that on a chip like this.
Right.
But, yeah.
But, like with the limitation of the chip, I think it takes a certain someone to be able to do something that is simple on a simple chip and still make it sound like if you were playing this on a piano, something that would still have like a full body to it, even though it is, 3 tones that you have to work with.
Yeah, I think the bass that you were mentioning, with the bass with the noise, was really prominent here, and I thought it was really interesting that about halfway through the track they're doing this like tremolo or vibrato on the bass, which you don't hear that very often, actually. It's kind of an unusual thing. A
little unusual, but I think that he pulls it off for this. I think it worked out well. Let's get into another track. This is from Stage 5. All right, that was from Stage 5 from Yuurei-kun on the MSX2, composed by Manabu Saito.
I love the urgency of that track. It just,
I love this one. This is great. I mean, at first, like, the trill on, it sounds a little bit like
something.
It sounds a little unclean, right? And I think the complexity as it builds is pretty incredible.
I've heard this soundtrack a few times now, and what's really interesting is it sounds like everything fits together, but all of the tracks are very distinct from each other. Like that sort of grunginess, you don't actually have that in much of the rest of the soundtrack. It's just like one or two tracks that tries to be aggressive intentionally.
Right. This game, a little bit more about it. We kind of talked about the gameplay. The graphics, I think, are top notch. It uses the MSX2 hardware, so it's able to do a little bit more than what the MSX could do previously, and I think it takes great advantage of that. And I believe this, seriously, to me, out of all the games that I've played on the MSX, this is probably one of the more polished and pretty looking games. I think it rivals anything we had ever seen on like the NES or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm really big fan of the Retro Game Challenge or Game Center CX games.
Right.
There's some of the later games have this like vibrant look to them, and they're like, wow, it's just like how the games look. And then you go back, and most of them don't look like that.
Yeah.
But this game looks like that. It's got just beautiful colors, well-defined sprites. It's such a joy. Like, I was attracted to the game when it was first turned on. It was like there's the Sacom logo, which is kind of brush stroke. And then the game turns on, you have this like bright purple screen. It's like, ooh, I want to play this.
Yeah. It's very, the colors pop.
Yeah.
In every level. And, everything's very well established, easy to see. The only thing that drives me nuts about anything the visual department on this game is that first boss, because the screen starts shaking the lower the boss's health gets, the screen starts like vibrating so much. Like I seriously had to like look away from the screen because it was making me like get a headache. But after you pass that, it doesn't do it again. So just make it through that first boss and you'll be all right.
Yeah, what's something a little bit odd is this game has mini bosses and main bosses, but they're oftentimes like just a few screens apart. It's not like you have a boss halfway in the stage.
It's like a pre-boss.
Yeah, sometimes they'll be like right after another, and other times they'll be a little bit more spread out, but there's no real rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah, I think the mini boss in the first level, it looks like a giant eraser.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's like an easy kill. And then like I want to say it's like the next screen over, it's like the main boss of that level. It kind of cracks me up.
You have like 3 more screens, and then you get to this wall, and this like angry like
mouth
face is spewing enemies and shaking at you.
Oh, it's great. But then after that, you get into this really kind of cool, vertical scrolling level. And this is like where it's auto scrolling. So you have to kind of like time things out. And immediately the difficulty level ramps up.
Oh, yeah.
It gets really hard real fast. I mean, the first level is like, anybody can get through it. But like as soon as you get to like level 2, it's like, okay, put on the gloves.
The gloves are off. Yeah, it's got a pretty cool visual style too. You're going down this chamber with like candles as obstacles and
stuff on the wall. Like looks like little cabbages.
Yeah,
shooting out at you. I don't know what that's all about. And then you got like birds and like all sorts of stuff in there. It's a challenge. And the boss after that it's like this giant snake thing that you have to perfectly time out. And
it's like a rock snake almost.
Yeah, it's like a rock snake. So this game, when it came out in Japan, it came out on the Mega ROM, which is a cartridge. It was a 2 megabit cartridge for the MSX2, and it was sold for 6,800 yen. So that's roughly $70 at the time. But another way it was distributed was, it's kind of interesting. So this is something that I didn't really know much about. It's called the Takeru machine. And it was like this software distribution machine that was made by Brother Industries in Japan. And what it did was it was a vending machine where you could buy like these blank cartridges or a floppy disk. And then you would take that floppy disk and put it into the other side of the machine. And you would select the game you wanted and it would write the ROM onto that cart. And that's how you could, buy all your games if you wanted to do it that way.
Yeah, and I think people talk about the Famicom disk system a lot for the music, but I believe it worked almost the same way.
Right. So
in terms of the actual mechanism of how you got the game is on disk.
Right. So a lot of other systems were supported by this. The PC-88, 98, the X1, the FM Towns, and a lot of other Japanese PCs made use of these Takeru machines. And I only kind of heard about them, like rewritable machines, like in, some of my research digging up, but I'd never actually seen a picture of one, and I came across one online, and I was like, wow, that's what they did. There's this huge, like, it kind of reminds me of what are they called, Redbox?
Yeah.
Now, like in front of like every 7-Eleven. Yeah, and it was kind of like that, except you got to keep it, and you could reuse the cartridge, but you would lose the old ROM. It would burn a new ROM to it. So this game was distributed by the Mega ROM, but you could also buy it in its disc form that way and play it on a floppy. So
that was like 30 years ago, and it still sounds so advanced.
I know. And to even get more advanced with it, what was kind of interesting to me is that it had an ISDN modem attached to it. So games that weren't actually installed on the system already, it would actually make a phone home, download that game, and then burn it. I mean, this is like...
That would have been. I would have been like,
the early
wowed.
90s.
Yeah, I would have been so wowed by that.
Black magic back then, man. I would have been like, what is going on here? But no, I just thought that was pretty cool. And they had a whole magazine and everything around it where you could like get a membership and get discounts and stuff like that. Anyways, let's get into. We were talking about the bosses earlier, so let's play a track. This is the only boss music. It plays during every boss, but it's kind of fun. So let's take a listen.
That was the boss theme from Yuurei-kun, composed by Manabu Saito.
It's a great track, but like I keep imagining that shaking screen and like, so frustrating. Cool track though.
Yeah,
very frantic.
What's cool about that track is that the second part of it just really takes the ghost theme to the extreme. Yeah, it's really funny. But I love that one moment just before the repeats where they just like all of the music drops out for like a split second.
Right. Yeah, I mean the track is cool. I think that first boss just kind of like spoiled it for me, but like other than that, it's fun.
Yeah, a lot of the bosses, especially if you know what you're doing, you can beat them probably before the song even loops. So it's probably good that it's a pretty short track. Like the first time you play a boss, you might be hearing it for a while though.
yeah, because the good thing is you get like I think infinite continues.
I think so.
Yeah, you can keep trying until and I think even if you get like a game over, you start from the beginning of the level, so they don't dump you off at the title screen again at least. So
yeah, there are checkpoints in this game. It's not as cruel as it could be, especially for like a shooter type game, which would always start you at the beginning of the level sometimes. So it's not too bad. I mean, it's really fun and not super punishing, which it probably wouldn't be fun if it was.
Yeah. It's just enough difficulty to be fun and keep you wanting to play. Like I got this next round. This next one, I totally am gonna get it. You lose again.
Oh yeah.
But this one,
I learned the boss pattern. I think I got it this time.
And then like 8 more tries, and then you're like, okay, I think I got it this time. Anyways, so that was the boss music. Let's listen to the last stage of the game, stage 7, and we'll be right back.
That was stage 7 from Yuurei-kun, composed by Manabu Saito.
Just like 5 different keys that goes through or
Oh,
something.
yeah.
Like it really, it sounds so.
It's a dangerous key change, I have to say. Like,
yeah,
only advanced composers enter here. It sounds like it could go bad, right? Like, he brings it home, but like,
there's a few points where you're like, wait, what?
yeah, it's like, I would say not many game music composers are going to do that in the middle of the track and like base an entire phrase off of it, because it's like you do it twice. It's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, I know. And then just when you think you've heard a loop like twice already, then he goes into this little kind of twinkly deal and jumps right back into the loop. But it's still such an odd track. I think this last level is he's really kind of like playing with the player, I guess. He's, really messing with him mentally. So
yeah, I mean, there's so many different tricks that music can use to kind of get your mood. It could be faster, it can be, like really catchy melodies, but here it's just using more of like blues scales and the kind of the sour notes there to give you a little bit of like tension there, that because it's a slow track. It's actually fairly slow.
Yeah, it's really toned down. Definitely not my favorite track in the game, but very unique. And,
it doesn't sound anything like any of the other tracks.
Yeah, he's doing something there. All right, so let's get actually into one more track. This is the staff roll of the game. I love this track, so I think we should take a listen. What do you say?
I say let's do it.
Let's do it. So this is the staff roll from Yuurei-kun, composed by Manabu Saito. All right, that was the staff roll composed by Manabu Saito for Yuurei-kun.
I have to say, he really knew how to write just really interesting contrasting sections. I mean, for as simple as the music is, and we've said that already, it's just, I love this track.
Well, when you say contrasting sections, explain that.
So if you listen to that first part, it's just this very pleasant melody, and then you have this B section, which is a little bit more
like a dun dun dun.
It's a little tense.
It has a little classical feel to me, actually.
Yeah, that third section just has a totally different feel from any of the other parts. And so, I don't know, as a person that composes occasionally and has explored music quite a lot, it's very interesting to hear how much you can do with so little.
Right. Well, you have a degree in music, so
well, yeah,
give yourself a little bit of credit there. But yeah, I do know what you mean. Like there is, and this kind of might go hand in hand with it being a staff roll, being able to have a little bit more freedom in changing, completely changing mid-song into something completely different, because it might have, the staff names and then show like some images and stuff like that. So you might have a little bit more freedom to explore, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I watched the playthrough of this, and I felt like I had triumphed just watching the thing. I was like, wow, this tune is like, I beat the game, like without having, without suffering through like losing 100 times. It just is so upbeat. I think it really sells the staff roll, like you won kind of feeling.
Right. Well, I do want to say, this game we've been talking about today, it's a blast. We couldn't recommend it enough. I think that once you play it, you listen to music, not everybody can really appreciate the simplicity, I think, sometimes of just PSG, but when you combine it with the game, it adds this amazing aesthetic. The whole mood and everything that goes around it, I think, is what drew me in and had me keep playing. And honestly, I fell in love with this title. I think it's just a blast. It's one of the best games in my opinion, and I've played a lot of MSX games. This is one of my all-time favorite.
Yeah, I have to say, I I love retro games, but sometimes it's hard to go back to games that you've never played. But this to me felt almost like an instant classic. Like if I had grown up with this, I would have such fond memories.
They should have had this on the NES.
Oh,
they
yeah.
really should have, and we could have all enjoyed it. It is a perfect title for. I mean, I think it would have been a huge hit. It's in Japanese, but it really doesn't require any language skills at all. I think anybody can enjoy it. Now, the game actually got a sequel in a sense. It's Yuurei-kun 2. It's Suika Scenario, which is like additional scenario. And this, so there's something a little sketchy about this because it came out on like a disc magazine and you had to put in the special code and then you could unlock the game. And it's an MSX DOS game. It doesn't look polished. It has System Sacom's logo pop up on the screen, but the game doesn't. It feels almost like an older Atari game. It just doesn't have the same feeling. So I think this is probably some kind of like, knockoff, fan kind of knockoff or something like that. But it doesn't feel quite right. All the music is the original music too. There's nothing new. That right there tells me that there's something up because they pride themselves on their music and they would have written something new for another game. And right.
I was looking through their text adventures and they all have unique soundtracks and there's, numerous games in the same series. It's weird that they would have like this kind of like prototype or beta floating around with the same soundtrack.
Right. For MSX DOS, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, I'm calling BS on it, but whatever. We did have to mention that the existence of it, I guess. But anyways, today we talked about Yuurei-kun on the MSX2, composed by Manabu Saito. If you want to know more about the show, you can find us online at pixelatedaudio.com for our show notes and the track list. We can also be found on Twitter at pixelatedaudio and Discord, and it's getting a ton of traffic these days. There's a lot of chatter going on, and I can barely keep up.
Yeah, the Discord channel when I first joined was sort of quiet, but nowadays it's like I'll see dozens of tracks, and it's like, whoa, slow down! I can't listen to all this fast enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good. I mean, if you're into game audio, I mean, obviously you're listening to the show, so join the discussion. You can lurk, you can just pick out tracks and listen to them and stuff, but join in the discussion. It's fun place for everybody to kind of get together in like one location and just chat video game music 24/7.
Yeah, all different kinds. There's no system that isn't represented really. I've seen stuff like from arcades to weird obscure stuff to more mainstream consoles. It's a really great collection of people.
Right. If you like the show and you want to leave us a review on iTunes, that's always appreciated. A great way to help our show and to support it is to check out our Patreon. And if you go to patreon.com/pixelatedaudio, you can find our page there. You can also find the link on our website, and we invite you to check that out. Also, I want to give a big thanks to Gene for stepping up and joining in the episode today.
No, I really enjoyed it. At first I wasn't sure, and then the more I listened to the soundtrack and the more I sort of played through it a little bit, I'm like, this is really good. I got to be on here on this.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to get this show edited for, release in a few hours, and we'll see how it turns out. And if you're new to the podcast, make sure you check out some of our past episodes. We just did an episode on Brainlord for the Super Nintendo. And it's like an action RPG dungeon crawler. It focuses on puzzles and stuff. It's a blast. Great soundtrack. So go back and listen to that one. And then you can listen to an expansion pack. We had Gene on about a few episodes ago. Yeah. A lot of fun. We did Sega Genesis kind of expansion pack and just kind of talked about that together. It was a lot of fun.
Really nice cross-section of genres and styles and just representative of the Genesis. And I love the Brainlord episode too. That was a great one.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, great soundtrack. Kind of spoke for itself, I guess.
Yeah. So as long as we're doing plugs, I wanted to mention two quick things.
Please.
So I'm a really big fan of, paying respect and tribute to a lot of these game composers. And, when we have an episode like this where we're talking about a composer that's passed, I like to give them a little bit of extra love. So there's an upcoming Digging in the Carts album coming out, which has a Manabu Saito track on it. Right.
I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Digging in the Carts, a collection of pioneering Japanese video game music. And if you guys aren't familiar, Digging in the Carts is this, video series where they kind of talk to a lot of these composers that were really influential.
Yeah, it's completely free online. I think Red Bull had it, Red Bull TV or something like that. Yeah.
It's very relevant to your interests if you're listening to the show.
Yeah,
It's like,
I mean, you should have seen it by now.
yeah, it's so good. And the other one is actually a podcast that I just discovered called Audio Panic Room. Episode 34 is just an entire episode dedicated to Manabu Saito. It's a beautiful tribute, a lot of really great music. It's a nice cross-section of his tracks from various systems. It's about 45 minutes long, so you'll hear, his output over the years. And I mean, if you liked this episode, it covers FM and FM towns and MT32. It's a lot of more robust sound. It's a lot more robust sound generation than this one. So if you like his composition style, it's nice to hear.
We could have picked any of his games
totally.
to do for this episode, but we decided on this one because all of his stuff is incredible. So yeah, definitely check out that episode of Audio Panic Room. It's more of an audio podcast. There's no dialogue, but you really get a good sense of, and it's like he generates some great playlists, and it's really enjoyable to listen to. All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening. The track taking us out today is the ending track of Yuurei-kun, composed by Manabu Saito. Thank you guys so much again, and we'll see you back in a few weeks for a special episode with not exactly a retro game, but I think it'll be a fun one to listen to.
Retro enough.
Yeah. 70 years retro. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. See you back in a few weeks.